Cyberpunk 2077. You've really had some ride, haven't you? The intriguing first teaser trailer, the years of silence, an explosive marketing campaign, a series of delays, a horrendous game launch, and finally, an attempt at retribution. The game's had more swings than a kid's playground. People got excited, people got worried, and people got angry. But to the credit of developers CD Projekt Red, they didn't give up on a game that was derided by so many. They could have done an Anthem and simply tried to sweep it under the rug. But they didn't. And now, with the upcoming expansion, Phantom Liberty, CDPR are attempting to come full circle and bring the game up to the standard we were all expecting. The expansion will not only introduce a whole new campaign and region to Night City, but basically rebuild the entire gameplay system from the ground up. So just what is Phantom Liberty then? Should we forgive CDPR for their mistakes? And will this expansion be the final retribution for Cyberpunk 2077? CDPR first teased the game all the way back in 2013, but it wasn't until E3 5 years later that we finally got to see the developer's vision of a futuristic dystopia based on the tabletop RPG created by Mike Pondsmith. Starring Keanu Reeves and to be released on PS4 and Xbox One, the game was scheduled to launch in April of 2020. But behind the scenes, things weren't going so well. Development initially began in 2016, after the release of The Witcher 3's last expansion, Blood and Wine. Studio head Adam Badowski headed up the project and essentially started development again from scratch and threw out several years' worth of pre-production. This led to the resignation of many top developers. The biggest issue was the need to develop on their proprietary game development tool, Red Engine, the same one on which they built The Witcher, whilst having to adapt it to a first-person perspective and add various new gameplay elements, all while attempting to make the game at the same time. This was described by one key developer as like driving a train while laying the tracks down in front of you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd quite like the tracks to be laid down already when I'm on an intercity service myself. Top executives also insisted that the game would release before the launch of the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S in mid-2020, something developers knew was completely impossible. They thought it would take another 2 years at a minimum. Funnily enough, they were right, because, you know, they're the ones making the damn thing. But executives and investors were asking for too much too soon, and CDPR's extensive and dramatic marketing campaign led to skyrocketing buzz around it, something many thought was the company's primary interest over actually making the game. So yeah, things were heading for disaster. Oh, there was also the little matter of a global pandemic, making everything much more complicated. Communication became far more difficult between departments, and most of the devs didn't have console development kits at home and could only test the game on PCs. So it's no wonder the game released in such a sorry state. The litany of issues is well reported, from flying NPCs and missing textures to hard crashes and corrupted save files. The experience was not good on console. PC players had it much better, as did the 3 owners of Google Stadia, which ran the game surprisingly well. The best way to play Cyberpunk 2077. Ironically, the PS4 and Xbox One versions, you know, the ones CDPR had initially aimed for, were even worse, to such an extent that Sony even pulled the game from its storefront until the Polish studio could get its act together. And, as usual, it was the fans and developers who had to suffer most. The game still sold 13 million copies upon release, so those at the top of the company got their payday. But fans were left with a broken game and shattered promises, and the devs were left to rue a disaster they could see coming and suffer the ire of fans desperate for someone else to blame. CD Projekt's CEO Marcin Nichinsky was left to face the music, releasing several apology videos and promising to fix this mess. He got all the props for The Witcher 3's overwhelming success, and quite rightly so. He'd been at CDPR since its beginning as a trader of bootleg games in Poland during the fall of communism. His methodology of fan-first business practices had stemmed from the need to repackage pirated games with extra content to add value. Otherwise, pretty much anyone could go and pirate the games for themselves. That mantra held as his company grew in size and started to develop their own games. And they've always been steadfast to avoid many of the monetary business practices that gamers loathe today. You won't be seeing any loot boxes or NFT shenanigans in a CDPR game anytime soon, that's for sure. To the developers' credit, they really did get to work. Shelved was the initial plan of releasing various small DLCs and a large expansion over the course of a year or so, and instead the team knuckled down and slowly but surely righted the game's wrongs. Patch fixes were numerous and vast in scope. The game became far more stable on consoles, and broken quests and NPCs were brought back to a functioning state. Don't get me wrong, even now the game still isn't perfect. You'll still see T-posing pedestrians and graphical issues every now and then, and we're usually willing to forgive and forget those, right? I mean, I certainly can. And for one particular reason, the game itself is actually really good. CDPR are excellent storytellers, and the main narrative of Cyberpunk 2077 is great. A tale of sinister corporations in bitter dispute and organised gangs pulling the strings from the shadows, coupled with a Blade Runner homage of human augmentation and artificial intelligence, all come together to create a fascinating and engaging story. There are also plenty of memorable side quests to discover as well, including playing guitar at a rock show, helping out a sentient vending machine, and finding a gun that just loves a chat. For the writing alone, Cyberpunk 2077 is a game worth sinking your teeth into. But it gets even better, as the combat designed to serve this story is also top-notch. There are loads of weapons to try out, from your standard pistols, machine guns and shotguns, to your more unusual options. The game also leans heavily into its theme of body augmentation, with cybernetic enhancements giving you mantis blades, tripwires in your wrists, and even a rocket launcher for an arm. The weapons all feel weighty and visceral, with every impact being felt as every shot is fired. It's an absolute blast running around destroying bandits and cyber psychos with your arsenal of gear, and on par with any first-person shooter you can think of. And then there's the world of Night City, an absolutely spectacular place to spend your time. The world is dense and vibrant, with twisting passages meeting quaint market hideaways and seedy bars, coupled with a complex road network where every street leads you somewhere new and exciting. The surrounding deserts too are full of mystery and intrigue, always offering something new to discover. There are so many fascinating characters to meet, places to explore, and loads of cool stuff to find. Oh, and it's also pretty damn beautiful to boot. So yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 is a really good game, whose reputation was decimated by CDPR's mishandling. Which brings us to Phantom Liberty. Building on the work the developers have already done, this new expansion is a far more dramatic upgrade to the existing game than even its most ardent of fans were expecting. So, what can both existing fans and newcomers to the game expect? Phantom Liberty introduces a whole new area to Night City, called Dogtown. You'll partner up with government agent Solomon Reed, played by the delectable Idris Elba, and get embroiled in the conflicts that ravage the district. If you miss your fix of Keanu Reeves, don't worry, he'll also be back, along with Lizzie Wizzy, voiced by pop star and ex-partner of this guy, Grimes. You'll be able to get your hands on some brand new weapons, vehicles, and other items not previously seen in the game. It promises to be a huge addition to the first game, roughly half the size of the original, and akin to something like Blood and Wine from The Witcher 3. You'll also have access to a whole raft of new cybernetics, which go alongside the expansion's other big addition, a brand new set of skills and enhancements. The original skill tree, a mess of abilities seemingly placed haphazardly on the menu screen, has been replaced with a much more structured one. This means you can focus more on specialisation and aiming towards certain types of builds, as opposed to just throwing points into whatever ability takes your fancy. Many new skills have been included too, including a mid-air dash to improve movement in a firefight, and the ability to parry melee attacks, and even deflect bullets. There'll also be a new relic system to upgrade your cyberware as you go. However, you can't just go off and pick all the best enhancements and turn yourself into the Terminator. For one thing, armour and defence will now be based on your cyberware, rather than the clothing you find throughout Night City. Not only does that mean you can now focus on making your character as fashion conscious as possible, but you'll have to balance out your enhancements to make sure you have enough defences to go along with your offensive capabilities. But watch out for overloading, as putting on too many enhancements will now lead to debuffs and health penalties. Plus, if you've actually met a cyber psycho in the wild, you'll know that you don't want to turn into that. There's plenty of other improvements too, from giving the police a well-needed overhaul and making them an actual threat, to adding vehicle combat to help fight off those pesky coppers and generally cause as much carnage as possible. This all sounds very promising, and considering both CDPR's history of excellent expansions and the work they've put in to rectify the game's difficult launch, I think it's fair to just get a little bit excited. There will be a subset of video game fans who will never forgive CD Projekt Red for Cyberpunk 2077's launch. They'll point to broken promises, game-breaking bugs, and a product that quite simply should not have released when it did. And that's completely fair enough. Fans were led to believe this game would shatter all preconceptions of what an open-world city sandbox game could be, with previously unseen levels of complexity and spectacle. But what they got wasn't that. Not even close. It was a catastrophe. But the key word there is was. Cyberpunk 2077 was a catastrophe, but it isn't anymore. Phantom Liberty is coming at a time where the game is in the best shape it's ever been in. And that is a huge testament to the hard work and dedication of CDPR to make things right. This expansion isn't coming to save Cyberpunk 2077. It doesn't need saving, because CDPR have already done that. So instead, let's celebrate a fantastic game getting even better. If you haven't given Cyberpunk 2077 a shot yet because of everything you've heard before, now is the time. There's a whole city out there to explore, so you better get to it, Tune.